Good morning, Mashi.
Good evening, Dennis.
How's it going? I got one for you today from the wise old heart of Dolly Parton.
Oh, God, I love Dolly. She is a national treasure. There should be a week, not a day, a week of
A
mourning
week.
when we lose
Wow.
Dolly. She's incredible. Have you heard the stories about how just generous
She's wildly
and
generous with her time and her money and everything for sure. I have, yeah.
she's an incredible human being. She really is.
And I mean, 9 to 5, that's kind of where our podcast lies, right?
I'm working nine
Feels,
to
feels
five.
appropriate.
What a way to make a living. Have you seen the movie?
I've not seen the movie.
Dolly Parton's in the movie. Dabney
Awesome.
Coleman, Dolly Parton. I can't remember the other two actresses. It's great.
All right, there's your first movie rec of the day. But my quote is, you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain.
It's true.
But it's difficult though, right? In times of rain, it's difficult to think about rainbows. I find, and I think it's very human to feel like that.
Yeah, I think that there is a story we all tell ourselves about why we're doing whatever we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
even when it is your 9 to 5. Like I don't want to denigrate anyone's 9 to 5, but I'll use what in the U.S. we would say is a typical like slog of a job, like the 9 to 5 garbage man. By the way, I don't know if you know this, garbage men in this country can
Mm-hmm.
make like 6 figures. So it's like I don't know why you want to like 80
I
to
do
100
know.
grand a year.
I have seen that higher ranking like waste disposal officials have like
Mhm.
military dress photos,
Yeah,
like a
the
police
government,
chief.
and yeah, they're like government officials. But I think no matter what, you're telling yourself a story about why you're going through the grind. There's always some kind of rainbow. Now, is that rainbow the 2 hours you spend down at Alejandro's Cantina after work, knocking back beers with your drink buddies? Sometimes that's the rainbow. It is.
Sure.
Um, I will say nothing good, really. No, I shouldn't say good. Nothing great in my life has occurred without some kind of hard work, bad times, sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
and luck. I mean, I have to
We
sprinkle
talked
some of
about that
that in there
yesterday.
too.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but
it's funny you mentioned working as a garbage man as like a prototypical like low level job. When I was a kid, and you mentioned about the stories we tell ourselves, this is an interesting perspective. When I was a kid, my mom always jokes that I would regularly tell her that I really, really, really wanted to be a garbage man because they got to be outside all day. They got to hang out with their friends. I assumed the two guys in the back of the truck were buddies,
of course,
and they got to ride in a big truck. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what box you want a job to tick that this doesn't tick. And obviously, that's me being a child. But there's like, I've had fun doing bad jobs, and I've had a bad time doing quote unquote good jobs.
oh my god, yeah, it cuts both ways. The the rain to rainbow quote, though, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's even more. It's more than just, um, hey, you got to sit in the rain if you want to chase the rainbow. Is that Skittles? Chase the rainbow. God
Taste
damn those
taste the
marketers.
rainbow.
Taste the rainbow. Okay, yeah, damn marketers. It's this: the rain itself, as you sit there and the rain comes down on you and you're dealing with the rain, and we've all been there. And sometimes we feel like we're moving from one thunderous shower to the next. But the other part of the Dolly quote that's massively important to me: you cannot have a rainbow without the rain. The
Mm-hmm.
rain is not something you suffer through. The rain is not something you have to overcome or survive. You must have the rain to get the rainbow. It is an essential requirement.
I don't know if I believe that in like I think that's an easy thing to say from a position of privilege, which you and I are in both relatively good positions of privilege. I think there are plenty of I think it's very easy to look at people and go, yeah, okay, sure. Oh, I rev, but like if you're struggling to pay rent, if you're struggling to make child payments or feed your kids, or you have a health problem like that, it is very, very difficult to sit there and go, nah, but this is all going to cash in down the line.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean it that way. I don't mean that there
Okay.
there isn't always a rainbow. There isn't.
Well, but there's all okay, sure. All right, fair enough.
So which is to say this: you don't get a rainbow every time it rains,
Mm-hmm. But
but
every
every
time you
time you
get a
get a
rainbow, it did
rainbow,
rain. Yeah.
you had to get through the rain. And I think that's the important part. When you are struggling, I believe, and I've lived this life, paycheck to paycheck or no paycheck, and you're
Don't
thinking
cash
about
that yet.
rent. Yeah, don't cash it. Hey, you know that paycheck? Yeah, it's on the drawer with the last two. Yeah, don't cash any of
Don't
those
cash
yet.
any of them.
Um, I think that But you know what? Those moments of rain, those moments right there, that story we're alluding to there, it means so much. Do you know how much value the rainbow that I ended up with has to me because of that time?
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the people that I work with now, or that were part of that experience, or were part of that company after that phase, they don't understand what it's like. They assume this success, they assume all the good times are how it's always been,
Mm.
never understanding what it was like during the lean times. And yes, do they value that rainbow of a company? This, yes, they do. Is there any way they could possibly embrace that rainbow the way I did, knowing what we had to go through to build it? Absolutely not. You just can't. That experience doesn't exist.
We talk a lot about opportunity and about, dealing with difficult things and preparing yourself for when to be able to seize the opportunity when those things, when, a door opens, God closed door opens a window type of stuff. Do you think that plays into it? Like, if you're in a tough time, if you're struggling, if it's raining, do you feel like you're waiting for the first signs of color in the sky, or do you got to keep your head down and just let the chips fall where they may?
Sorry, I deviated from this because your example was so good. Like, hey, Mosh, I don't buy into that because there's people who are slogging paycheck to paycheck. How are they going to make rent? How do that? I don't want to be trite, and I certainly don't want to
Sure.
minimize any of that experience. What changed, and I want to speak about myself here,
Mm-hmm.
my life experience. What changed for me getting out of that lifestyle was really focusing on what rainbow I was chasing. I found myself so reactive, so caught up in life. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, I'm going to pay rent on time. I'm going to pay my student loan payment on time. I'm going to be 2 weeks late on my car payment. This is like the life I lived. Okay, I got to catch up on the car payment. I'm going to be a month late on my student loan payment. I got rent. Rent I got to pay. I can't get evicted. And so I remember juggling back and forth, a month on, a month off on my car payments, student loan payments. That's like a real life. That was my life. And I was making good money. I was making over 6 figures, but that was life. My student loan payments were huge. What really changed that all for me is focusing on what rainbow I was chasing. Because all I was chasing in those areas were the bills. All I was chasing was trying to keep my head above water, try to get those bills paid, and just make it to the next paycheck. That's not going after a rainbow. That is just sitting in the rain and trying to swim through it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's flooding. So for me, and maybe for others, suggesting this is the solution for everyone, I think really minimizes problems and makes trite and small the real problems people have. For me, it was really sitting down. And I was just doing this yesterday. It was my birthday, working on my goals. Sitting down on those goals and making them not like, I want to get debt free. They were goals like, I want to pay my student loans off within 1 year. I want to have my car payments down to this amount. I'm going to overpay within 1 year. Things like that level of detail changed everything for me. It gave me a goal. It gave me a focus. It gave me a way to know if I was on track.
And the other line of this is that I don't think this is, maybe it's not that it's not good advice, but I don't think it's easy to swallow or applicable advice for people in the rain. I think this is especially pertinent advice for people looking at rainbows. So, and we talk about success being a poor teacher and stuff like that. And it is so easy if you go through a rough patch, be it financially, romantically, personally, whatever, and then break through the other side of it and something good comes along. Our brains are so quick to forget. Yeah. And just move on and compartmentalize and forget about it. And I think it's okay to let yourself bask a little. It's okay. It's normal. It's part of life. But remember, hey, sometimes, and like you said, sometimes it's directly because of actions you took when you were struggling that you're succeeding now. Sometimes you got a little unlucky and now you're getting lucky, and they're totally independent. And maybe there is no lesson you can learn except for them's the breaks, and it happens, swings and roundabouts for everybody. But I do think this advice is much more powerful or much more useful to think about when you're in a good position, because hopefully that's when I think you're much more likely to internalize it and have it still with you when you end up in a bad position down the line.
That's so funny. I don't know that I agree with that, because I think the greatest thing you can have when it's storming around you, particularly when you're in the cycle I was in, paycheck to paycheck, trying to make it balance and just thinking, fuck, how am I going to get out of this? Mm-hmm. Is that lifeline of hope, that game plan. This is how you're going to get out of it, because you're never going to get off of that hamster wheel just playing ping pong back and forth. And when I say I live this life, I'm talking like 2 or 3 years. I'm not talking like a month or two in. I was like, this
wasn't a rough
sense.
summer.
I got to
Yeah.
make some changes. You know what I mean? So I do think, you got to reach for an umbrella when you're in the rain. You got to find something. And I think it's important, not because that's going to be a roadmap out and that's going to save you, but because the cognitive dissonance it takes to break you out of that cycle, even though the solutions aren't apparent, and the solutions aren't going to be readily apparent, and they're not going to be solved this month, next month, or even in a year. But whatever it takes to break you out of the mindset of that cycle and stop just wallowing in the rain, I think it's important. I think it's important to really defend that rainbow.
The problem is, I think it's unlikely that you're going to be in a position to heed and take that advice in that state. It's much, much harder. I think it's much easier to try to soak it in when it's easy so that you have it with you when it's hard.
Totally. But when you devise that plan when it's easy,
also
we talked
fair.
about this. No plan.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's also fair.
And when you get punched in the face, those are the plans on the fly. Those are the roadmaps and the plans you follow. And I think that's when it's really important. Now, if you have a great foundation, obviously that Tyson quote is just about like, what's your plan going to be? Now, you will, and we talked about this in that episode, if you lay out your fundamentals, if you lay out the A, B, and C's about what you need to accomplish, maybe the roadmap's gone, but you must always focus on A, B, and C. So what you're saying is still appropriate. But I do think, I just think it's so important in bad times to try to break out of that mindset however you can. And again, I just want to reiterate, I've lived this life. I do not mean to minimize it, because you would have said that to me then, and I probably would have said like, fuck you, you have no idea what I'm going through. So right. I get that. And I don't want to minimize that at all. I'm just talking about my life experience, but it was important. And when it finally happened, it changed everything for me. It changed everything for me.
Well,
and it was that perspective I needed.
Look, Mashi, day after your birthday, I hope you go into the new year with a lot more rainbows on the horizon than rain.
Absolutely, Dennis. You have a great morning.
You have a good evening. It's the classic sort of, give me the power to accept what's out of my control and the wisdom to know the difference. It's kind of another take on that quote, right? Like being able to make decisions and accept the results regardless of what they are.
I think the other thing, though, because even in that thought process, and this is what this evokes to me now, I don't know, I struggle with this now, 44 today, still struggle with it. I think it's a great concept and it's a fine idea, but putting it into practice is so tough, which is stepping away from the results altogether. Win, lose, or draw. Stepping away from the results altogether, because the real work, the real goal, the real success and failure of an endeavor is how we carry ourselves, how we play the game, what we do. As you know, Dennis, we recently sold a business, and that part is massively successful, particularly in this economic climate. But when I look back at the process of merging companies and working in a merged company and then ultimately selling it, the process of the merger no doubt was required for the sale. And the sale is an overwhelming success. It's a boon to my life. There are so many things when I look back with a critical eye on how I carried myself, where different business decisions were made that I knew, I should fight this more, I should do this differently. And I didn't. And I go back to that well constantly in my current thinking at work today. So, and I want to bring this up because the result was positive. I won. We won. And yet still I go back and say, how did I play the game? What do I need to learn from it? Because I think that's where the real work is. That's where you can grow. That's where you can recognize, let me pat myself on the back. I actually did a great job there. All of those things are what we really need to be striving for. But all we look at are the results. All we look at is what happened at the end. We focus on our losses more than our wins, right? Wins don't have us go back and critically evaluate, how do we play the game?
Success is a terrible teacher. Exactly.
And so I remember hearing this quote as a kid and not understanding that, because in my childlike, it's like middle school, I think, in my childlike misunderstanding of the way life works, I did have the idea that's like, well, no, you could have accounted for things differently. You could have done things differently. And of course, that's childlike.
It's naive.
No adult, no sophisticated or even semi-sophisticated person should see the world that way. You can't. All you could do is play to the best of your abilities.
Also, you mentioned like looking back and being like, "Oh, I would have done this differently. I would have done that differently." I think it's important to cut yourself some slack when doing that. But to be honest, if you look back over any period of time, let's say a year or two, like you were talking about, and there aren't things you would have done differently, not only would I say, "Oh, you're not making a big enough risk," but I also don't think you're being honest with yourself. There's no way everybody, played perfectly for a full 24 months. That's outrageous. The tricky part is, though, where if you're using the poker analogy, if you go all in with your pocket eights and there's an 8 on the table, and then you get to see what the other player had. If you're playing heads up, it'll give you percentages, and you go, "Yes, I got 60%. Whatever happens, I got my money in good. Great." You never get those numbers in real life. In real life, you'll go shove, the shutters will come down, and then at the end, chips will come out or they won't, and you'll have no idea how good the decision you made in a vacuum, like mathematically, was. So you do have to look at results, though, successes and failures, and use, like you mentioned, what you've learned in the interim to go, okay, well, if I presented with that decision again today, would I have made it differently? That's the only way I think you can do that in the real world.
I think I agree. I was going to say, like, when I critically evaluate the situation with the company and the journey we were on and the moves I made, it's not this decision or that decision. I think that actually is too granular. I think about what I was feeling at the time, what my gut was telling me. And you know this, I had your ear and I was talking through, like, I've got a bad feeling about this. And I recognize now there was so much of my internal dialogue, my thought process, my instincts, really my gut calls that I overrode, that I didn't go with, that I didn't fight hard enough for. That's what I'm talking about. And yes, if I sit here and we talk about it, I could give you a list of things.
You tally them up. That's not the same, right? That's not what we're talking. Yeah.
No. And that's not what I'm evaluating. I'm not evaluating the specific decisions I made during. I could. And I have done some of those, and I can tell you why I did this or why I felt this way. But really, overall, when I go back to the process, and again, I want to remind everyone, this was an incredibly successful process. I think about some of the alarm bells that were in the back of my head or that were churning in my gut that I ignored. That's what I take from it. What if? And, to be honest with you, if I listened to those more, this thing wouldn't have been a success. My life, I probably would have been happier. I probably would have been happier, but a lot less stress.
Well, that's tricky then. So if you're presented with, Groundhog Day, the same situation again, do you think you'd behave any differently?
I think it's a great question with the Groundhog Day thing. I think about this a lot because of my pseudo obsession with Doctor Who and time travel. I think you have no choice but to act differently,
because even if you try to act the same, it's not honest.
Too much. Yeah. You know too much. But would I? Yes, I would act differently with the same goal in mind. I would orchestrate things in my own mind to achieve the same goal, but I would
try to do it less painfully at times, right? Basically,
I would do it by spending a lot less money.
Sure.
And I think I would be a lot more heads up about certain things.
So would you say your biggest lesson out of this, and I'm sure something we'll return to, is that you feel like your bar for when you should put your foot down, essentially, or stake your claim, should be lower than it is? You're too quick to be like, okay, path of least resistance. I want to be easy to work with. I want to play ball.
Yes, but it's the process before that. That is what I needed to do more of. But I want to step back from that. Earlier than that, my biggest takeaway was trusting that voice in my head, trusting my gut. That's when it tells me, bro, draw the line. The line must be drawn here, no further. That's another Picard quote. First contact. But it's that voice that I ignored. I was like, you know what? Okay. Now, the other part of it is I had good friends that I trusted that were like, hey, don't worry about that. Just trust me.
Weather it, yeah.
My call. And I wouldn't change that. I work with friends. I work with a team I trust. And part of that is when they come to me privately and say, back off of this. I just trust me. Please back off of this and let me handle it. I do that. And if that blows up in my face, I don't care. I do it again next time, and I do it again next time, and I do it again next time. That's just how I function on the team. Just as if I come forward and say, hey, no, back off of this, let me take care of it, I need them to believe me. But what's crucially important is understanding not only can you play a perfect game and lose, but as is so much more common in life, you can play an imperfect game and win.
Mm-hmm.
Being results oriented is a failure. It is not a way for us to properly grow and adapt in life and in business. Our successes need to be critically evaluated just as much, if not more, than our failures. Because it's not whether you win or lose in a given situation. It truly is how you play the game. Because the wonderful thing about Magic, the wonderful thing about poker, and the wonderful thing about every freaking day we're above ground is we get another round. We're playing another game. And are we going
to learn? You need to grow. You need to not focus on whether you won the last time, but plan the next one better. And it is very hard to humans are very quick to attribute their own successes to skill and their own failures to luck. When there's an equal mix, luck doesn't discriminate, right? It's all
right.
It's all even-handed, and it's very, very difficult to have a critical eye looking back. And indeed, now on your birthday in the new year, dude, looking forward.
I know, and I think that it's tough. The other thing I would say, the older, wiser Mashi would say, is you got to take time to look backwards, and you got to take time to look forwards. But we, as humans, I think we do too much of that. What's most important to me here today and every day is just looking at now.
Looking around, yeah.
I forget so much of it because I'm like, wow, what's tomorrow hold? What's next week? What are my goals for the end of the year? And sometimes it's good to just be like, what are your goals for today?
This afternoon, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I hope you have a fun birthday. I hope you get and celebrate, and, have a great day.
You do the same. Have a great morning, Dennis.